just for you to know it. And also, if you have to leave earlier or whatever, just for you to know it, that we will be able to share it with you later, and also for all of those that are not able to attend today to the session. So welcome and thank you. Here you have Jenny, Business Development Representative at Slack in Toronto, and also co-founder of She Sells Too, and also Ellen, Account Manager at Google in Dublin. Girls, welcome and thank you a lot for being here. Welcome to UP Female Mentoring, an initiative that I have already explained you what we aim to and what we want through this initiative to empower young women. And well, all yours. And thank you again for being here and enjoy it.
Thank you so much. Well, hi everyone. It's great to be here with you all today. To quickly start by introducing myself, like which Helena just did there as well. I'm Jenny, and this is my partner in crime, Ellen.
Hi,
And today we will be sharing our story of how we came to work in tech sales at Google and Slack, and hopefully spread some interest around tech sales as a career choice for some of you. We'll start with some introductions of ourselves, and after that we will give you a high-level overview of our initiative She Sells Too, which is where we actively work to support women in sales. And before sharing more about our jobs at Slack and Google and our current roles there, and last but not least, we will also share some tips and tricks around how you can get your foot in the door and what the different roles actually entail in sales. So like I said, I'm Jenny, and I am a Swede currently living in Toronto, Canada. But previously, I spent a bit more than 2 years working and living in Dublin, Ireland, which is where I had the pleasure to meet Ellen and Sylvia, who's on the call here as well. While I was your age at university, I have to be completely honest with you guys. I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do with my career. I was studying business and marketing, and one thing was for sure, I had no desire to get into sales, and it never even crossed my mind. So one day when an ad tech company from Dublin reached out to me on LinkedIn looking for Nordic sales reps, I actually declined their offer to interview straight away. And it wasn't until months later when I finished my studies that I reached back out to AdRoll myself, and I found myself more curious about the role. So from that moment, when I was flown over to be interviewed, I realized what a golden opportunity this was, and I completely fell in love with the company culture right away. I worked many different roles at AdRoll, and after 2 years, my boyfriend and I decided to move closer to his family in Toronto, which is where I am today, working in sales at another tech company called Slack. And I believe that you guys use that at the university, and still loving my job every bit. And now I'm going to hand it over to Ellen to let her introduce herself.
Thank you. Yeah, so my name is Ellen. I'm also Swede, and I'm living and working in Dublin since 4 years back now. Although at the moment I'm actually home in Sweden, which I'm very excited about, being home with the family for a bit. But yeah, so in opposite of Jenny, I actually knew quite early on that I wanted to have a career in sales. I was browsing through a lot of university catalogs as a 16-year-old and came across the role key account manager. I started to Google the term a lot, and I was so fascinated. It was really explaining how you could work very closely with your clients to help to grow their business and work just as much with the people you were selling to as your own company, to make sure that you would prove the value of the company that you were selling for. I thought that sounded super interesting. And when I brought this up to my dad, he actually explained that that was what he was working as. But it made me super fascinated. And I also saw that this was an opportunity for an international career. Then in university, I studied something called international management at an international business school in Sweden. I also did an exchange semester in Toronto where I had a lot of electives in sales, studied effective persuasion and sales and negotiation and conflict resolution. So like during my university period, my interest for sales really grew. Not without doubts, though. I had some university peers that were working in sales at the moment, and I thought that they were so much more like confident and more bold than I was. So I'm like, if they're good in sales, how will I ever be able to work in sales? But yeah, after university, I did a bit of a backpacking in Australia, and then as I was just about to start traveling home again, I came in contact with Sylvia in this call. She was a friend of a friend, and she referred me to Agile in Dublin, who was looking for Nordic speakers at a time. So I came home to Sweden, went to Dublin for interviews, and yeah, like a month later, I moved over to Dublin to start working as an SDR in Agile. Spent a couple of years in Agile, and then a bit more than 1.5 years ago, I started to work in Google as an account manager. Still loving to be in sales, and if I could have told like my 16-year-old self that I'm actually doing what it was that I wanted to be doing back then, I would have been very, very happy and very, very proud. So looking forward to get to tell all about that today to you, and happy to answer any questions that you might have in the end as well.
Yeah. And then just taking a little bit more of a dive into She Sells Too, what it is, why we started it. So back in 2018, when both Ellen and I were working as account executives at Adroll, I realized how much I absolutely loved working in sales, and I loved my job. I also realized that I was embarrassed telling people that I work in sales, especially when going back home to Sweden and telling childhood friends or relatives what I did. I always, when they asked what I worked as, I always answered, well, I work for a marketing company. And it frustrated me so much, and I didn't like my own behavior, especially when I knew that it contributed to the negative perceived image of sales. So if you guys just ask yourselves, like, what do you think about when someone says, I work in sales? Perhaps it's a car salesman or someone who calls you during dinner time at home. And I even often got the question, if it's not stressful not getting paid enough unless you actually make a sale. The list of preconceptions just goes on. And as I had these realizations, I got back to Dublin after a weekend at home, and I made the decision to change my behavior completely and stand up for the profession that I loved. I shared these thoughts with Ellen, and one day, and the day after, we actually started what is now called She Sells Too. So we soon realized that we're not alone in feeling the way that we did, speaking about our jobs and careers, and especially being women in sales. But wow, we also realized how many amazing superhero women there are out there that have struggled with these feelings as well and fought the battle of being women in sales on their own. So we started She Sells Too to change the perceived image of women in sales. And we decided to start by listening to women's stories from all over the tech industry that work in sales currently. So when hearing these stories, a few themes kept recurring. For example, that sales was never being discussed as a potential valid career choice at university. So you guys are doing a great job here. And most women accidentally also fell into sales when they were trying to achieve something else, like a career in marketing, for example. But they all loved their jobs in sales. And all these themes are what we at She Sells Too are looking to change the image of, so that women like yourselves can see sales as a valid career option and an option that you will be proud to pursue one day. And I think that's the next slide. Yeah. So just taking a look at where we are today and just a little high overview of She Sells Too. We started it here up in the left corner. You see two happy girls just started She Sells Too in 2018. And we started our initiative, like most initiatives like this, with our presence on Instagram. After all the beautiful response we got, we expanded our platform to LinkedIn, where we today reach over 500 followers who daily engage and share tips and tricks and stories with us. We constantly chosen to listen to and act on the feedback that we get, which is why we started a podcast to share women's stories as well. One of our most listened to and popular episodes is actually the one with Sylvia on the call here, who did an amazing job sharing her career choices, her life in sales, and her story of what life in sales was like for her. The team has grown, which we're really happy about. And we now have a full-time editor, who's Connor, on board, and a director of content, who is our friend Elle. And both who also have insights into large tech companies and advocate for women in sales at their organizations, which is HubSpot and Salesforce. This way, we also get insights from different markets, such as the Canadian one, the Irish one, and the Swedish one. And we hope to be able to support and get more insights to other markets in the future as well. But if any of you have questions about tech sales or jobs in these areas after the presentation, we will do our best to support and help in any way we can. And now I believe Ellen's going to walk you through some of the learnings that we've had since we started She Sells Too.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny. Well, as Jenny mentioned as well, like we've had many learnings since starting She Sells Too. Like from the talks we've been to the women we've interviewed and the articles that we've read. And one of the main learnings and facts that we came across has been the imposter syndrome. And kind of to start with, and no need to answer this out loud, but I would like you to ask yourselves, like, how many of you have ever felt that you've been walking into a room or in a setting in university or at a previous job, and you've been having the feeling like, shit, when will they find out that I don't belong? When are they going to realize that I'm not as talented, smart, as good as the other people in here? Like, that's a thought that I've had more times than I can count. I've had it in university, in Agile, in my client meetings, starting in Google. And if it is the case that you've had this feeling as well, you should know that this is nothing strange at all, because that's actually what the imposter syndrome is. Imposter syndrome is something, it is the fact that when you have the feeling like you'll be exposed as a fraud or an imposter, and the actual definition states here, imposter syndrome is a psychological pattern in which one doubts one's accomplishment and has a persistent internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. Like, as I said, this is something that I've encountered so many times. I know Jenny has as well. But it wasn't until we actually attended a networking event in Dublin where we realized that this was a thing. It wasn't just us being silly or worrying a bit, but it was actually something that more people felt. We were attending a talk, and a woman that was VP of sales at a very good company in Dublin, who had more than 10 years of experience in sales, she was telling us that she felt the imposter syndrome every single day. Every single day in her career, she was wondering, like, when will they kick me out? When will they realize that they hired the wrong woman for the job? So for us, that was like a big wake-up call, like, this is a thing, this isn't just us. And it even grew like this feeling of understanding that this is a big thing when I started in Google, and it was actually brought up the first day of the onboarding program. So this is one of the key learnings that we really brought with us and that really had an impact on us. And the question is then, like, why are we bringing it up here then? So imposter syndrome is actually very much more common for women. About a third of all women have experienced imposter syndrome, while men are 18% less likely to experience it. That means that probably a third of all of you have already felt that. But it also means that in your careers, you will have a slight disadvantage compared to your male peers, which we think is very, very sad. So we want to make sure that we bring this up to you so that you can be aware of it and hopefully combat it and talk about each other about this to make sure that it doesn't have too much power over you. So for the imposter syndrome, to start with just a few of the symptoms so that you know what it is that you should look out for. So failure to realistically assess their own accomplishments, attributing achievements to external factors. And this one I'm a big on. I don't know how many times I've said that I closed a deal because of timing, pure luck, or because I managed to have a really, really good colleague on the call. So many times I've said that it was something else than my achievement that led to a closed deal. And then also like berating your own performance. Looking at all of this, like this is all obviously very severe symptoms. But then if we look more at the consequences, we have stress, we have anxiety, we have low self-confidence and self-sabotaging. And as you can probably see, these are things that could have a very negative impact on your careers, but also on your mental well-being and your confidence and your way of living. So really, really want to make sure that you're aware of this so that you can start to combat this and not let the imposter syndrome take over for you. And then how to combat it then. We're no experts, but these are some of the tips that we've tried ourselves and that we've also read up studies about on the best ways to combat imposter syndrome. So first of all, break the silence, like we're doing now, and which is why we're bringing it up to you. Just the fact that people are starting to discuss it, that you understand that maybe some of your peers have felt it, or maybe your manager or even your lecturer someday, will probably make it a lot easier to deal with. Separate feelings from fact. Be aware of that just because you feel something, it doesn't make it true. Try to look more about the pure facts that you have at hand instead of what's going on maybe in your gut or in your head, because that's not always the case. Develop a healthy response to failure and mistake making. So many people that are experiencing the imposter syndrome are super scared of actually making mistakes. But what we think is important is like making mistakes, like that's how you grow and learn. So we want people to have a healthy response relationship to mistakes, because that's what's going to take you even further to your careers. Fourth there, like be good at rewarding yourself. It's so easy to look at maybe bad things you're doing or mistakes or something that you're not happy with, but then we just like go past the good things so fast without even celebrating it. So when you've done something good, make sure that you reward yourself, celebrate, and really take it in that you did something good. And lastly there, write the rules. And what that means is that having the imposter syndrome is so easy to set rules for yourself, being like, I should never ask for help, I'm never wrong, or I don't make mistakes. And we think it's crucial really to write those rules, set better rules for yourself that are going to allow you to make mistakes, to grow, and also be more kind to yourself. So this is something that we just really want you to be aware of. And if anyone like after this meeting would be keen on hearing more, discuss it, and so on, this is something that's very close to both mine and Jenny's hearts. So please feel free to reach out to us if it's something that you'd like to talk about more. And with that, I'm going to let Jenny talk a bit more about her career at Slack.
Yeah, so me at Slack. To start off, starting at Slack and starting at most tech companies, I must say, to speak for the tech industry as a whole, it's like starting a new adventure. Like many tech companies, Slack started my onboarding by flying. They start your onboarding by flying you out to Silicon Valley in San Francisco for training. And for someone who'd never been there before, this was an absolute fantastic experience. But most importantly, they communicate immediately that they invest and they believe in people that they employ. With that being said, coming from a smaller company like AdRoll, you realize also how different it is to work at a larger organization like Slack in terms of how anonymous you become and how fierce talent and competition internally can actually be. But going back to the onboarding and training experience, as I just touched on there, if you are looking to get into sales and want to learn as much as you possibly can, an organization like Slack may be exactly what you're looking for. It can be nerve-wracking to start your career, and it's easy to feel overwhelmed. But once a company like Slack has hired you, they will invest in you, and that is something I really want to emphasize here as well. Never forget that you are a company's investment as well. Anything from pitching to creating sales decks or simply how you run a customer call, it will all be broken down in step-by-step guides for you and different courses when you start a new job like this. One thing that I really wanted to touch on as well before heading into the world of tech is that how big of a difference it is between a SaaS company and an ad tech company. Working in ad tech versus working in SaaS, sales is two very different experiences. Ellen will explain more about this as well because she still works in ad tech at Google and have a lot more knowledge about it and the industry now. But When selling into SaaS, you will sell into personas such as IT or engineering, for example, or finance. So most often the departments and lines of business who handle the application for the organization. In ad tech, you sell specifically to marketing personas. And what is the big difference there, you may wonder? And I feel personally, when starting working at Slack, that it is the different passions you have. So if you are more passionate about engineering or IT or finance, for example, like personally in school now, maybe that's the type of sale you want to get into further down the line as well. And it's just something to keep in mind when you start looking at sales roles and where you want to go. With the potential growth internally, the larger the organization is, the harder it is going to be to climb fast in your career. But keep in mind that having a big title is not always the best thing for your overall joy for work. And it can also give you a perceived look of how up someone is at a company. So when you're looking at an organization such as Slack, be prepared to work hard and an opportunity will present themselves eventually. But just speaking for myself here, and I know that Sylvia and Ellen has experienced this at a smaller organization as Adroll as well. You could get promoted maybe twice a year and get a pay raise twice a year at Adroll because it was a smaller organization. There was less competition, less internal competition to work against or work with in that sense. Versus at a larger organization, you have a lot more structure and it will just take a little bit longer to reach those goals. And what does my day-to-day look like? So in my role as a BDR at Slack, I am responsible for creating a momentum of interest with clients who are using the free version of Slack to some degree, and I educate them on why it might be beneficial for them to get the paid version of the platform. So with that being said, like many of you might believe, it doesn't include trying to push a product or a solution on someone who doesn't need it. So what I do is that I run discovery calls with people at organizations that we can see would benefit from Slack, but the calls are run in such a way that pitching our platform rarely occurs. Instead, during these conversations, focus is on asking questions to truly understand if Slack is actually something for them. It's about opening a customer's eye to what the platform can actually do for them. But I won't know that until I know how they work. So you can't offer them a solution unless you know what the problem might be down the line, or even if there is a problem, and even if they need Slack. So I'm now going to hand it over to Ellen to talk a little bit more about her role at Google.
Yeah, thank you. And as I mentioned, I work as an account manager at Google. So meanwhile, Jenny is working with acquiring new businesses for the company. I work with our already existing clients. I work in large customer sales, we call it. So that means that I'm working with some of Sweden's largest advertisers. A few of them that I'm sure you've heard of would be Volvo and Klarna. And my role is really to be the main point of contact to the clients. And together with my extended team, I need to solve for their main business objectives with the many different solutions that Google has to offer. So how I like to see it is that I'm growing the clients' businesses and growing Google at the same time. So from Google's point of view, and what I also like have targets on and what I need to sell would be, of course, revenue. So driving more revenue for Google. But also help Google drive product adoption and make sure that whatever the engineers come up with, we make sure that it gets rolled out to the clients. And from the client's point of view, as Jenny said, I work with marketeers. So it could mean that I help clients enter new markets. It could be that we build out solutions for them to grow their market share or their market consideration or favorability. But it could also be that we help them grow their online sales together with Google Search. So it's a very versatile job. It's very fun. In the morning, I could sit with Klarna and discuss their Super Bowl campaign. And in the afternoon, I could sit with a retailer and discuss really nitty-gritty search strategies to make sure that they can grow their online sales profit. So it's a very, very versatile job, but it's a lot of fun. But what I would mention as well, and of course, Jenny already touched upon that, kind of the difference between working at a small company versus a large company. And Google being one of the biggest companies in the world, coming from Agile to Google was quite a big shock. So with Agile, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with the company, but the office in Dublin was quite small. We were 100 people working on one floor. You knew exactly everyone that worked there. You could speak with a VP over the coffee machine, and everyone knew the work that you were putting in. So you felt that, oh, as long as I'm working hard, it will be rewarded. And I love that. I had a lot of fun in that. And then I came to Google, which just the offices in Dublin is more than 6 buildings. There are 5,000 people working there, meaning that there are more people working in the Google office in Dublin than it is in my hometown. So just that was a bit of a shock, but also that the fact that you could get a bit starstruck if you saw like a high up manager walking past you in the cafeteria, and that you realize that just working hard wouldn't be enough. You have to work hard, but you also have to be confident in being vocal about what it is that you're doing. You have to make sure that you communicate to the manager what you're achieving, the products that you're working on, the projects, how you're growing your clients, and so on. And for me, being a Swede, it was very scary in the beginning. We're very used to being humble and that you shouldn't talk about your achievements. You should just do it. Meanwhile, now I have to get more used about, speaking up about what it is that I'm doing, which has been an insanely good learning. And I actually have to think a bit more about what is my individual contribution, how am I creating value, and what is it that I specifically drive for my clients. So it has been a bit of a shock, but I do think it's very, very exciting to work at a big corporation. There are a lot of different opportunities. You get to work for people all over the world, and whatever you're interested in, you're going to find someone that already knows a lot about that. So, for example, when me and Jenny created our podcast, I was just walking across the floor. I said hi to a Dutch guy sitting close to me, and I was mentioning that I wanted to start a podcast. Well, he had already run a podcast for 2 years and started to show me which equipment to use, which products to use, and so on. So that's what I really love, that you get exposed to so much learnings, and there's always something new to learn as well. So I would say small versus large company, there's nothing necessarily that's better or worse. It's just a matter of preference, what you're used to, and also where you are in the stage of your career. So never feel that when you're getting out of university, don't say that I never want to work in a large corporation or I never want to work in a small one. It's all about testing and see what feels best for you. Then when it comes to ad tech, as Jenny said, it differs quite a lot from like SaaS ad tech. My basic opinion is that if you're good at selling, you have the basic skills in building relationship, listening, asking the right questions, closing deals, being good at negotiation, and so on, then you could work as a salesperson at any company. The company can teach you the product details that you need to know, the industry, and the personas that you're going to work with. But with that said, even though if you work in ad tech, you work in sales, but you do also work so close with marketeers that you have to be their strategic advisor. I speak about marketing on a daily basis, which is a bit weird because in university, I thought marketing was way too fluffy and nothing for me. But now I speak with marketers all the time. And it's very exciting, and I do get to help them with their strategies, and I really need to understand the different terms that they're using, how they need to think about growing their businesses, and how they need to think about vouching for themselves internally. So it's really fun. But with that said, it's like if you don't like an industry, if you wouldn't like marketing, if you would like SaaS, maybe you don't want to speak about it day in and day out. So when you are starting to apply for roles, look at the type of roles, so sales, if that's what you want to do, but also look into a bit more of the industry and try to find something that you'd be curious in learning more about, because you will get very skilled about it. So make sure that you're tapping into a field that you have curiosity in. And that could be fintech, that could be SaaS, that could be marketing. And there are a lot of opportunities out there. Lastly, what I would say as well is like working in sales is working in a job where you'll have constant new learnings. You will never feel that job is slowing down, but you will always feel that there's more to learn. You can learn from your colleagues, from your clients, from workshops you are at, and so on. So it is a way for you to feel that you're never slowing down. And lastly, they're vouching for working in a big corporation. Here you see me on this picture is actually me going to a Toastmaster event during work hours, learning to do public speaking before Corona, obviously. But so the big corporations can really help you open up a world to a lot of new exciting learnings and clubs, organizations, and so on. So that's a bit about me and what I'm doing in Google. And then handing it back over to Jenny to talk about more like how you can also get into the tech world.
Yeah, thank you, Ellen. So how can you guys get your foot in the door? The first point we would both like to emphasize here is to keep your LinkedIn up to date. It might sound silly, but both of us have actually experienced being so-called headhunted over LinkedIn. And the whole reason I discovered tech and sales is because of LinkedIn. As I said before, when I was studying marketing and sitting in class at university, I received a LinkedIn message from a recruiter at AdRoll. And I've always been amazed that she even found me and changed my fate the way she did. And when I later on asked her why she decided to reach out to me, she said that they use specific filters such as marketing or speak Swedish or goes to this university and so forth. So if there's one takeaway for you guys from today's session, I would say go and set up LinkedIn, or if you already have LinkedIn, just keep it up to date and make sure that your references and your current skills are just up to date. It doesn't have to look professional or anything. It's just a really good way of making yourself seen, basically. And later on, when we worked at AdRoll, Google actually reached out to Ellen regarding the role that she is currently in. And look how incredible that went. Do you want to add a little bit more to that story, Ellen?
Yeah, I can do that. And what I would say as well is like, it sounds so fancy when you say headhunted. It's basically a recruiter writing to you on LinkedIn. But for me, I was very lucky because I always had like Google as a bit of a faraway dream that I wanted to work in. But at the time, I didn't see myself skilled enough. So I think that if they wouldn't have reached out to me, I wouldn't necessarily have applied. So it does open up a lot of opportunities. So don't be scared about, having someone reach out to you, and if they want an informal chat, have a chat with them, see what they say, because it could open up a lot of new exciting doors for you.
Exactly. The second point there is find a role that's most suitable to your experience. Entry-level roles are a great start to look for, and Ellen will walk you through in the next slide here what some of examples of the entry-level roles might be. But try and focus on, as we said before, what you're most passionate about at the moment. So for example, is it marketing? Well, perhaps then start looking for ad tech companies, or if it's economics or finance, there are tech companies like one example is Stripe that focus specifically on solutions like that too. So the main importance is that you sell what you believe in and what you're actually passionate about, because you're going to be speaking about it a lot. And the third point here is to expand your network. And what we mean by this is to constantly have an approach where you allow yourselves to ask people for help. Before getting a job at Slack, I asked for a lot of coffee meetups with people at Slack to understand their culture, but also to get my name out there. Having someone internally that will advocate for you is just pure gold. At tech companies, we can also tell you this as like a insider information, but at all tech companies, there is something called a referral program where the employees actually get a bonus for referring a candidate that gets hired. So people will be happy to refer you if they find that you're a good fit for the role. And they can't know that unless you advocate for yourself and set up a virtual coffee or just a chat or anything like that. One thing that needs mentioning though is for you to never just send over a message to someone on LinkedIn and ask them to refer you without even introducing yourself. It happens a lot more than you think, and I've had messages from random people in my inbox, no introduction or anything, asking me to refer them. And I have to be brutally honest here. If you can't even take the time to introduce yourselves or take time to learn more about the company or the role, I just delete the message straight away. So that's just something to keep in mind as well. The fourth point is don't overthink your CV. Or go into a job interview thinking that you need a perfect CV in order to get a great job. I bet you all seen some memes out there when you apply for a job, they ask for like 15 years of experience and fluency in Chinese, and you're 5 years old. It's not like that at all. But just make sure to highlight your relevant experience, even if it's a project that you're working on by yourself, or if you've been working weekends at a supermarket, whatever it might be. Just be proud of your own experience and keep it short, concise, and well thought through. And the last point here is the interview prep. So what we would say there is do your research, read up about the product, read up about the company culture, their values, and so forth, but also connect with the job description and requirements. And one thing that I always do before interviews and prep is just a personal preference for me, is that I always listen to podcasts where leadership at a company has been interviewed or had a talk recently or something that they're just passionate about personally, because it takes you so much further to be able to name drop someone that works in leadership, or for example, listen to a recent interview that the CEO at the company did, because just name dropping or saying things like that in an interview session is really, really good. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ellen to explain more about the roles.
Thank you. And just something that I wanted to highlight as well with what Jenny said, with that you don't have to have a perfect CV. Like me, Jenny, and also Sylvia that used to work in Agile, we've seen people with so many various backgrounds being the best people we've ever seen in sales. And I think one person that sticks out to us mostly is the guy that we used to work with. And his background was zoology. And one would wonder, like, how does someone in zoology end up in sales and working in Agile? But he was the most skilled salesperson I've ever seen in my life. And so just to know, like, you don't have to have the perfect CV or the perfect background. You just have to be good at, speaking, listening to people, and understand people's needs and issues. So just a bit of a one to keep in mind if you're ever doubting your CV, like anything can work. But with that, I'm going to take you through some of the different roles. So when applying for roles or start browsing through career pages, it can always be very tricky in knowing what things actually mean. If you apply for a sales role, it's rarely going to say salesperson or something with selling. So we thought that we're going to take you through some of the most common terms or names for these kind of positions. So we have like BDR, SDR, AM, and AE. To start with the first one, we have business development representative and sales development representative. These are often used interchangeably, but they can vary a bit from company to company. Sometimes, for example, an SDR can be seen as a bit more junior than BDR, but that's something that you can check on the role description as well. But most common is that these two roles are entry-level roles. And what that means is that you kind of get the chance to pay your dues to the company. You get their education in everything selling, everything about their product, everything about their company. And in exchange, you really learn, you work hard, and then you get the chance to pay your dues and work yourself up in the company. What the role actually entails most often is that you work to find and qualify leads for more experienced sellers. So that could be cold calling, emailing people, doing research, and really be the first point of contact that creates an interest in the company and in the product you're selling. And before anyone gets super scared of cold calling, I know I feared it so much when I started in Agile. But then you get used to it. And I think that after you've done that for a few months, you will never be scared at calling someone again. You also get very used to it. Like I could have picked up my phone in my sleep. And also one time I sat in the middle of a cold call when someone put on a vacuum cleaner right next to me in the office for some reason. So you get very, very used to this. So it's nothing to fear. And I think it's the best education you can ever have for working in sales. Then going over to the next role, account manager, AM. So that's what I'm working with. And that would be most often handling an existing book of business, so existing clients. And your role is basically to grow their value and their spend with a company, make them use the product more, make them try new offerings, and also really maintaining the relationship. This can be measured in different ways: revenue, product adoption, and it often has a bit of a balance between long-term relationships together with quick wins. Lastly, we have the AE, account executive. I think this is the most classical role of a salesperson and the role most people think of when they actually think of someone working in sales. An AE's responsibility is to build a relationship with brand new clients who are currently not customers. And their main relationship involves acquiring new customers, pitching, and get the customer to realize the true value of the product that they're selling. And something that we would say is that being an AE is a bit about us being an entrepreneur within a company, because you do often get to set your own boundaries in a way of how you want to work, your task, your schedules, and you are allowed to be creative with the way that you are approaching new clients and the way you're acquiring new clients. So it can be a lot of work. It can be not that much work, really depending on how much work you're putting in and how much you have to do. So the AE is a very fast-paced role, very fun role where you really get the chance to close deals and bring in new clients to the company. So those are the main roles, and that's just a bit of a start for you to know what kind of roles to look at and what to search for when you're excited about going into your new careers. And with that said, we thought that we would have a bit of a Q&A in the end. If anyone has any questions or are curious to know anything about Slack or Google.
Well, I'm curious about something.
Go ahead.
Well, it's been said in almost all the companies nowadays with the pandemic situation and COVID, so the digital transformation in all companies has accelerated so fast. But in your cases, even Google and Slack, that is really a digital company. And how has the pandemic affected it? It's the same? It is not? And well, just curiosity.
I can start. You're right. Like, it's been so different, but it's also, I think it's such a luxurious thing to work in tech when things like this happen. Working for Slack during this, and you guys probably know it when you use it, but especially working in sales, I speak to so many people that only used email before. Like, that was the only way of communication, and they didn't know what else to do. It was a phone call, or it was email, or it was like walking up to someone in the office. And all of a sudden they felt the urge, like they couldn't connect with people. And as a salesperson speaking to these companies that weren't using Slack, we had a huge, more and more people kept on reaching out to Slack for that reason, because they found that the communication for the company was so much better, and they needed a better solution to communicate with their peers and with their boss and in teams and things like that. But also, as for myself, I realized quickly when I was speaking to these customers how lucky I was. Like, my only change was actually bringing my laptop from my office in Toronto to my apartment. And then my day looked the exact same, except from that I didn't go into a meeting room and have meetings with my customer. I had them over my laptop. So I think I was personally very little affected by the move, just because of the product that I'm working with. And I feel very fortunate about that.
Well, no, I can imagine that in your case in Slack, this has benefit, no, in your role to sell the Slack program. But yeah, no, I was thinking also about teleworking and all of these kind of things that, well, it seems that we are going to future, and this came to stay. But yes, I could imagine that in your case, very digital companies, so your day-to-day has slightly changed in that sense.
For sure.
And I can also add on that one, like, very lucky to be in Google, because like for Google, a whole lot more people have started to use Google with everything becoming so digital. But as when something happens in the world, the first thing people do is to search. You can straight away see if someone is worried about corona, if someone needs to set up a new office space at their home. And this really has given us the chance to help a lot of customers, a lot of businesses out there that has been struggling. I work with anything from travel clients to online retailers to finance companies, and really trying to help them figure out and pivot their business to still be profitable within all of this. With the help of the data that we see and the trends that we've seen, it's really been fun to feel that you can have some sort of impact. And then as for me personally, like for Jenny, I just needed to bring my laptop home and that was it. And it has also allowed me to spend more time with my family. My sister had a baby last year, and I've been able to be home more than I ever have during the last 4 years. So in that way, it's been a big luxury. So been lucky to have that kind of position within a pandemic. And Elizabeth, saw that you had a question there.
Yes. Hi. No, first of all, thank you very much for this super interesting webinar. I felt very represented that I'm also a key account manager, and I was like, I felt everything that you guys said. I just wanted to ask you, you have been talking with other women on these fields. How have you? I've always had the feeling that people consider sales to be a man's job. Do you also have this idea when talking with women, or have you also felt that this is more of a men's world than a women's world, or what is your idea on this?
I can say both. Me and Jenny both started in Agile, and I say we because we started with like a couple of weeks apart. But Agile first was quite a ladsy culture. It was a lot of men, a lot of very confident men that you would see as a typical salespeople. But then we also saw the people like Sylvia in this call, but also a woman named Sinead, who were fierce, really, really talented salespeople, but that I could also relate more because they were super fierce, but they were also very calm and humble and very soft people. So I think when I joined Agile, my opinion shifted because I saw that you could have both things. And now working in Google, my main managers are women. The CEO of Google in Sweden is a very strong, powerful, amazing woman. My industry head is a woman. So I've seen so many powerful women since I started in ad tech. So I really changed my opinion since I came into this industry.
Yeah, I feel the exact same. It's a great question, and I really appreciate you asking it because it's one of those things that we always bring up when we discuss, especially with senior women in sales, how they've experienced the last 20 years of working in sales, and all of them express that it's becoming better and better. And these companies, especially within our industry, the tech industry, it is. The amount of women applying for these jobs and daring to be there and speaking up, it's not as male dominated anymore at all. And they're so happy to see it, but it's also something that we really strive for with She Sells Too, is just for more women to not have the preconception of going into sales thinking that they will be working with only men and they will have no chance, or that it's very male dominated, because it's not anymore. And what we've seen as well is that women are just as good, if not better, at selling, because we are also naturally better listeners, which is the key point of sales. So it's a very interesting aspect, and I'm really happy to say that we've seen a trend of more women going into sales as well.
Aloma, you had a question there.
Yes, thank you very much, first of all, for the presentation. And I think it's such a positive initiative. So thank you very much for being here. And as a quick note, for instance, I had no idea that a business development representative was a sales role. I've seen it on LinkedIn, I've seen it on plenty of places, and I really didn't know. So that was very good to find out. And then I'm still a student, and I still don't know exactly what I'm good at, and I never really considered a sales position. So in order to have a better idea of what the role could look like, I would like to have an idea of what are some of the most exciting moments of your positions currently, to see a bit more what you're doing.
Of course. Do you want me to start? Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So for myself, I feel like sales is when I get most excited personally is because you're meeting so many interesting people on a daily basis when you're having meetings and when you're not necessarily pitching to them, but you're running conversations with someone about something that you actually didn't know much about from before, and all of a sudden you're in a room with an expert who knows everything about this product or who sits and have these struggles every single day. And what I like with the job and when I get really excited is when I learn how like versatile the role is. So for example, just to give you an example, is I was having conversations with this engineering team for a full week, and I just had all of a sudden I knew all these like terms and different expressions that I had never heard of before, and we were just trying to figure out how they could use Slack, how could it work for the different parts of their engineering organization. And my brother, who works in engineering, I saw him after this week, and he started talking about his work week, and I could pitch in and I could tell him, oh, are you talking about this and this? And he was so surprised, and he was just like, oh, how do you know this and that? And I think that's when I get really excited, because people, when you get over the thought process that sales, you walk into a room and you have to pitch, you have to know it all, you have to answer all their questions. Like, it's not like that. They know that they are the experts, and you're there to find the solution that fits them, and you're the Slack expert in my case, versus they are the engineering expert. So that way you just always have this exchange of new information, and you have a lot of fun in those conversations as well, being able to ask stupid questions in that situation for me as well. So I think that's my personal favorite thing with working in sales.
And I would say, like, the reason that I wanted to start in sales was that you could work with your clients almost as partners, that you would work alongside of them. And now I have one client that I've been working with a bit more than a year. They are an online doctor. And obviously when Corona happened, there was so many things happening for them at the same time. So they were going through like massive growth, but also a lot of challenges. And these are people now that I speak with on a daily basis. We have so much fun. We joke about the new plants that we've been getting or how we find it being locked into our apartments. But what I find now is that I developed such a good relationship with them. So now if I'm going to have like a big pitch, as we call it, where I'm going to speak to their main management, well, then I sit with the performance marketeers weeks in advance, going through what we should pitch to their own company, which ideas we should have, which metrics that are important. So I don't feel that I pitch to them, but I feel that I pitch with them, that we are trying to find a solution together to help their company grow. And yeah, speaking with these clients, like after every single meetings, I come out with like a huge smile on my face, because they are such genuine good people and I really enjoy working with them. So having that chance to build a relationship with people during this, like, yeah, just like this in a video call, and really help them be better at their works, help them grow. Yeah, something that I really, really enjoy. And thank you for the question, Aloma. Such a good one.
Thank you very much for all your answers.
Of course.
Alva, I see that you have a question.
Yeah, I was just wondering, you mentioned that it's perceived to be such a men's world, but also as I'm also a student, and I didn't think of sales as a possible career choice. But now that I think about it, for how I know I am personally, I think I would have struggles handling like the competition within the team. Because, for example, I really like to work as a team and not against my teammates. And I wonder how you guys can handle with this competitiveness, and how, or whether is it a misconception and you actually work together with your team, or how you handle this situation.
I can start there, because this is something that I had the exact same feeling before going into sales, and I couldn't have been more wrong. Especially, so it's definitely a misconception, for sure. And I always laugh at this, but a good example is that Ellen and I, got the responsibility to start selling into the Nordic market, and it was just the two of us. And we basically got free range to just sell to any Nordic company. And people like that we discussed this with said, oh, you won't be friends after this. And we were both laughing, just like, what do you mean? We're great friends. And we managed to, like, without any issues, without like, it wasn't any competition. We helped each other out, and it was always just like, okay, I'll do this for you, you'll do this for me. And I actually was going to say this to Aloma before, but one of the best things for me with being a BDR and a SDR, the entry level roles, was definitely that you're the tightest team that I can imagine being. Because when someone sits and cold calls someone and a customer is not nice to you on the phone or whatever it could be, people have always been in that situation, and salespeople are always like very outgoing, love talking to people. So it could be someone who got off a phone with a customer that wasn't nice, and like someone just walked up and like gave them a high five and said, oh, I had a worse one yesterday. And then you started laughing at that and you had a great conversation about it. So in my opinion, I think it's a big misconception, because salespeople tend to be very tight and just learn from each other and push each other.
And I would just say +1 on that one. There's always going to be some very competitive people. That's probably unavoidable, but I think most people I've been working with have been extremely helpful, very supporting. And yeah, as Jenny said, like if I've had a really shitty client call or some client said something bad, I would ping this to my colleagues and they would laugh and like, oh, we know this person, he used to work with me before, he's always complaining, or whatever it could be. So you're going to probably meet some competitive people, but you're going to meet a whole lot more nicer, supportive people that will probably become your best friends eventually.
Thank you.
Of course.
Sylvia, you had a question there.
Hello. I was actually going to ask you, now that you've been working for a couple of years in sales, when you, like, I know in most tech companies, there's a lot of reflection and like goals and looking back and, okay, what have I done well? What can I learn from this? What can I do better? Where am I heading towards? How do you think of the next couple of years when you're sort of encouraged to think about your career, where you want to be, what do you want to grow, what do you want to become? How do you tackle those questions now after a couple of years of having worked in that industry and in that team?
Good question. And I think it's always very difficult. And I'm coming out from a performance cycle, as we call it in Google, that we've had for the last couple of months. But I had some time to reflect of it. I always say that I'm not exactly sure of where I want to go, but I realized that I want to work smarter, not harder, is probably how I would like to define my future career. I want to learn to be more strategic with my work, really take a step back and not feel that it's the hours that counts, but instead what I'm doing. So in my future career, I don't want to work, 10, 12 hours per day, but I would rather feel that I work 5 super productive days where I can contribute so much value to my clients, to my colleagues, and then that I can enjoy my life outside of work too. And maybe that doesn't say that much about exactly which new role I would like to go into or where that's going to be. But for me, I think it's more about feeling fulfilled, feeling happy with what I'm doing, that I can contribute more than the exact role or the exact company where I would work in. Maybe a bit of a fluffy answer, but I think that's kind of like where I'm at the moment.
Yeah, I have to add to I think one thing for me and one big goal for me is, especially coming from ad role, we were very lucky starting at a company like that, and especially with the management and the people that were the leadership there. And one thing that I really learned from my experience there and the leader that I would like to become, looking back at different leaders that I now worked under in my different sales roles, is that I want to be able to, I've never been sitting in a meeting with my manager, I think that a lot of people who go into sales might think that all you talk about is your metrics and your numbers, and will you hit your numbers, and how much money have you brought in, and all of those things. Versus the questions are actually about like, how are you? Where do we need to focus for your development? Where are you learning more? What are you enjoying? And those questions, I would love to become a leader myself in sales and focus on those things that actually help me grow my team in terms of like their learnings and development personally and outside of work, whatever it could be. But those are the best managers that I've had. And those are also the best managers that I performed under. My sales metrics went up like because I was happy and I wasn't just looking at numbers all the time. I was actually just like learning and becoming better at talking to customers about the product because I was getting the right trainings and things like that. So my dream would be to, looking back, being that type of leader for a team in the future, where you just don't look at the numbers, but actually just the development of the person.
And then Laura, I saw that you had a question.
Yes, I wanted to ask if there's a specific recruitment process, like for example, in consultancy, there's always like this kind of set of steps. And I wondered if in sales there's also similar, or there are only interviews.
I think sometimes it differs from company to company, but in my experience so far, the normal first step would be for you to speak with the recruiter. Either they have a different set of roles that they think that could be of interest for you, or they have one role in particular that you applied for, or that they've kind of like headhunted you for. During the talk with the recruiter, they would probably tell you a bit more about the role, the company, what to expect, and so on. So a bit like a pre-qualifying call. Then once you've had the chat with the recruiter, it would normally be another call, maybe with a sales manager or someone from the team that you will be working with. That would be maybe a brief 20 minutes interview with questions about yourself, your background, your experience. And then after that, and this is how it was for me, so it can differ, of course, but then it is usually on-site interviews, as they call it, probably not in Corona times, but then you would have a couple, maybe 2 to 3 interviews in the office where you get to meet with different people. When applying for Google, it could be having one interview about more cognitive skills, about the industry, about culture, and so on. So that's in general, but I would say for the jobs that I've been applying for, it would be between like 1 to 4 interviews in total for a job. And maybe you've had a bit of a different experience with Slack there, Jenny.
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty accurate. I think, yeah, the first meeting is always with a recruiter, and that's very casual, like a very kind of relaxed chat to make sure that you are the candidate that they are looking for, but also it wouldn't be like a long 1-hour call or anything. I think mine was like 15 to 20 minutes or so. But yeah, I think you summarized it pretty well. I think one thing that I've actually never done is that I've never pitched or like sold, like pretend sold in my interviews, which is something I think is pretty common that you expect in a sales role. So I think that depends on what kind of sales role you're applying for, just what kind of company. But I've always been surprised when they don't have that. But it's, I'm not sure. I don't think you had that with Google either, Ellen.
I did have with ad roll though.
Oh, okay.
And funny to that story is that I had my mock pitch, as they call it, from a hotel in Vietnam with bad internet connection. But if you would ever have like a mock pitch for an interview, don't be nervous and don't feel that you have to know everything. They will probably look more at if you're asking the right questions, if you're curious, and if you try to learn what it is the client wants. So the mock pitches are never as terrifying as you might think when you hear about it. Cool. Anyone else that has any questions?
It's been so many good questions. I'm impressed.
Me too.
Yes.
And then obviously afterwards, if you would have any questions, like you can probably find us very easily on LinkedIn, and feel free to ping us, add us, and ask any questions that you might have.
Great.
And with that said, I'll probably stop the recording.
Yes.